My name is Evelyn Bennett. I'm 70 years old, and on the morning of my 70th birthday, I stood in my kitchen with a coffee cup in both hands, staring at the window above the sink and wondering how a house could feel so full of memory and still sound so empty. It wasn't the silence that hurt most. It was how familiar it had become. For nearly 50 years, birthdays had never belonged only to me. They belonged to us, to me and my husband Martin. He used to say I made too much of birthdays, and every year he said it the same way, smiling, putting on the jacket he knew I liked, pretending he had forgotten our reservation, even though he never once did. We had a ritual. Every birthday, no matter what else life was doing to us, we went to the same restaurant downtown, a small Italian place called Bellini's. Candlelight, soft piano, white tablecloths that were never quite white enough. A manager who greeted us like family long before we were old enough to appreciate what that meant. Bellini's was not grand. That was never the point. It was ours. Martin loved routine in the way only certain men do, as if returning to the same place year after year could slow time down. And I loved the way he looked there, looser somehow, softer, as if the weight of life sat differently on his shoulders under warm light and the sound of glasses and silverware. He died 3 years ago. Even now, I still hate how plain that sentence sounds. As if a life can be folded into 6 words and put away neatly. Cancer did what grief never prepares you for. It moved fast when we needed more time. By the time the doctors stopped speaking carefully and started speaking honestly, the ending was already on its way to us. After he died, I avoided Bellini's. I avoided that entire street, if I could help it. I told myself it was because I didn't want to sit in a place built for 2 and pretend one chair wasn't empty. But if I'm honest, it was more than that. Bellini's held too much of the version of me that had existed before loss. The wife. The woman who still made room in conversation for someone else to answer. The woman who could look across a table and be known without explaining a single thing. For a long time, staying away felt easier. Then 70 started getting closer, and something in me shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, just quietly. I started thinking maybe grief did not always have to mean retreat. Maybe honoring someone could look like returning instead of hiding. Maybe memory was not a room you had to lock forever just because stepping inside hurt. A week before my birthday, I picked up the phone and called Bellini's. The hostess answered on the second ring, cheerful and young, unaware of what that small act was costing me. Bellini's, how may I help you? I cleared my throat. I'd like to make a reservation for Friday night. Of course, for how many? There was the briefest pause before I answered. 1. She didn't pity me. She didn't stumble. She simply said warmly, absolutely, we'd be happy to have you. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen with the phone still in my hand, feeling oddly unsteady. Not because I regretted it, because I didn't. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had chosen something instead of merely endured it. That should have been the beginning of a peaceful week. It wasn't. My daughter Laura found out about the reservation 2 days later. She was in the living room when I mentioned it, standing near the bookshelf, straightening a framed photograph that did not need straightening. Laura had always liked touching things in my house while we talked, as if every conversation needed an excuse to take possession of the room. You made a reservation? She asked. Yes. To go out? I looked up from the envelope I was opening. That is usually what a reservation is for. She gave me a thin smile that didn't last. Mom, it's just dinner, Laura. Alone? There it was. Not the question. The tone. I had come to recognize it in the years since Martin died. That careful, patient voice people use when they've already decided what you should do and are only waiting for you to cooperate. Yes, I said. She folded her arms. I don't think that's a good idea. I set the envelope down. Why not? It's late. You'll be downtown by yourself. I've been downtown by myself before. That's different. I let out a small breath. How? She didn't answer right away, which told me she knew exactly how her words sounded. Laura had always described herself as protective. After Martin died, I appreciated it at first. She called more often, stopped by with groceries I had not asked for, offered help with bills that were already paid. In the beginning, it felt like love. A daughter worrying about her mother. A family trying to close ranks around a loss. But over time, concern changed shape. It became suggestion. Suggestion became pressure. Pressure became repetition. You shouldn't be living alone anymore. You forget things. This house is too much for you. Have you thought about assisted living? We should start preparing now before there's an emergency. There was always a practical tone to it, as if the erosion of my independence was simply paperwork waiting to happen. One evening, about a month before my birthday, she sat at the same dining table and said, You need to think realistically. I remember putting my teacup down very carefully before answering. Realistically about what? About the future. The future is still mine, Laura. Her mouth tightened. That's not what I meant. But it was close enough. Now she stood in my living room watching me as if a dinner reservation had confirmed something she had been silently building toward. I just don't like the idea, she said. You don't have to. You're not the one going. Her expression cooled. Why are you being like this? I almost laughed at that, as if resistance had come out of nowhere. As if I had not spent the past year being spoken to like a woman whose life was one signature away from belonging to someone else. I'm being like what? I asked. Difficult. That landed between us and stayed there. I looked at her for a long moment. Laura was 43 now, beautiful in a polished, controlled way that made strangers trust her quickly. She had Martin's eyes, which was sometimes hard for me, not because it comforted me, because it complicated everything. It made me want to be softer with her than perhaps I should have been. It's one dinner, I said at last. She picked up her purse from the chair. Fine. But the word wasn't fine, it was tight, edged. A word with a door already closing inside it. Before she left, she paused in the hallway. You know I'm only trying to help you, right? I met her eyes. That was the thing about Laura. She always said the most controlling things in the language of care. I know that's what you say, I replied. Something flickered across her face then. Hurt, maybe, or annoyance that I had stopped receiving her intentions as truth simply because she named them that way. She left without another word. After the front door shut, I stayed still for a while. In the quiet, I found myself looking at Martin's photograph on the console table near the stairs. He was smiling in it, one arm around my shoulders, both of us squinting in summer sun. The frame was slightly crooked. Laura had brushed against it on her way out. I went over and straightened it. She's pushing again, I murmured. The house, of course, said nothing back. Friday came gray and damp, the kind of evening that looked tired before it had even turned dark. I dressed slowly. Black slacks, cream blouse, my best navy coat. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I opened the wardrobe and reached for the jacket Martin always liked on me. He used to say it took 10 years off my age. I never believed him. Still, I put it on. At the mirror, I adjusted the collar, smoothed my hair, and looked at myself with the strange distance that comes with age. You spend enough years in one face, and eventually it becomes both familiar and surprising. I saw the lines around my mouth, the thinner skin at my throat, the careful steadiness in my eyes. Not fragile, not confused, not finished. Before leaving, I stood in front of Martin's photograph and touched the edge of the frame with 2 fingers. I wish you were coming with me tonight, I said softly. Then I picked up my keys and went out. The drive downtown felt longer than it used to, maybe because every street seemed to carry some earlier version of my life in it. The florist where Martin once bought peonies because he knew I loved them. The pharmacy where we used to laugh about getting older every time we added something new to the prescription list. The corner where we got caught in the rain once and ran hand in hand like fools 20 years younger than we were. Bellini's appeared at the end of the block almost exactly as I remembered it. Warm light through the windows. Small gold lettering above the door. People inside, leaning toward one another in conversation. Glasses catching the glow. For a moment, my chest tightened so sharply I had to stay in the car an extra few seconds with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I got out. The air smelled like wet pavement. My heels clicked softly on the sidewalk as I crossed toward the entrance. By the time I opened the door, I had pulled myself into that calm, straight-back composure women my age learn to wear when emotion threatens to show too clearly in public. Inside, the familiar warmth rushed over me at once. Garlic, wine, butter, piano from somewhere near the back. A young hostess stood behind the podium and smiled politely. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Yes, I said. Evelyn Bennett. She looked down at the book. Her finger moved once, then stopped. The smile on her face shifted, only slightly. But enough. Oh, she said. I felt something small and cold move through my stomach. Yes, I asked. She looked up, then back down again. Just one moment, please. The hostess stepped away with my name still sitting open on the page. I watched her walk toward the back, her posture slightly stiffer than before, like she had just remembered something she had hoped not to deal with. That feeling in my stomach tightened. Not fear. Something quieter. Something that felt like recognition without understanding. A minute passed. Then another. People came in behind me, laughing, shaking rain from their coats. The door opened and closed. Warm air. Cold air. Movement. Noise. Life continuing as if nothing had shifted. But for me, everything had. When the manager approached, I knew before he spoke that this would not be simple. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't rushed either. He looked careful. "Ms. Bennett?" he asked. "Yes. I'm very sorry, but there seems to be a situation with your reservation." The word situation sat wrong immediately. "What kind of situation?" I asked. He glanced briefly toward the dining room, then back at me, lowering his voice enough to make it feel private, though not enough to make it feel kind. "Your daughter called earlier today." My chest tightened. "She did?" "Yes." A pause. Then he continued, choosing his words like each one might cost him something. "She expressed some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation, something inside me went cold. "She told us," he said slowly, "that you are not mentally stable." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't land all at once. They came apart in pieces. "Not mentally stable." "I beg your pardon," I said. "She said we should not seat you alone," he added quickly, "and that we should not serve you alcohol." The restaurant noise behind him faded. Not completely. Just enough to make everything feel farther away. "That's ridiculous," I said. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. "She was very insistent," he continued, almost apologetic now. "She said you sometimes become confused." Confused. The word echoed strangely, as if it didn't belong to me, as if it had been placed there on purpose. "So because of a phone call," I said slowly, "you're refusing to seat me?" The manager shifted slightly. "We have to take concerns like that seriously." I looked at him, really looked. Not as a customer, not as someone asking for service, but as a woman standing in a place that used to welcome her, being quietly told she did not belong there anymore. "I am 70 years old," I said. "I drove myself here. I walked in. I spoke to you clearly. And you're telling me I'm not capable of sitting at a table and having dinner? It's not personal." "It feels very personal." That slipped out before I could soften it. He didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. "I'm sorry," he said again, "but we're going to have to decline seating you tonight." There it was. Final. Neatly delivered. Like a decision that had already been made before I ever opened the door. For a moment I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. Because reacting would have meant accepting what had just happened. And I wasn't ready to do that. Not there. Not in front of people who were pretending not to watch. "Of course," I said finally. 2 words. Carefully controlled. I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one said anything. The warmth of the restaurant fell away the moment I stepped outside. Rain had started. Not heavy yet. Just steady. Cold enough to sink through fabric if you stood in it too long. I stopped under the awning, just outside the entrance, and for a second I thought about going back in. Demanding something. Explaining. Proving. But something in me refused to do that. Refused to stand there and argue for the right to be treated like a person in a place that had already decided otherwise. So I stayed where I was, listening to the rain hit the pavement, watching it gather along the edges of the sidewalk, trying to understand what had just happened. My daughter, Laura. The word didn't feel the same in my mind anymore. Not softer. Not familiar. Sharp. Distant. Why would she do that? Not worry. Not concern. This was something else. This was deliberate. Calculated in a way I didn't yet understand. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, though it didn't help much. The damp air still found its way in, settling into my skin. I could feel my hands starting to tremble slightly. Not from the cold. From something else. Something deeper. Something that wasn't loud enough to be anger yet, but wasn't confusion anymore either. Then I heard a voice. "Ma'am." I looked up. A man stood a few feet away, just under the edge of the awning. Mid-30s, maybe. One hand holding the small fingers of a boy who looked no older than 6. The child was watching the rain with quiet fascination, his free hand reaching out for the drops. "I'm sorry," the man said. I didn't mean to interrupt. I said nothing. Didn't move. He stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice. "I was inside," he said, near the entrance. A pause. I heard what happened. Something in his tone made me pay attention. Not curiosity, not pity. Something steadier. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he added. I gave a small nod. Automatic. Polite. The kind of response you give when you don't want to explain something that has no explanation yet. He glanced back toward the restaurant window, then leaned in just enough that his next words didn't carry. "Your daughter didn't do that because she thinks you're unstable." I frowned slightly. "Then why?" He held my gaze, long enough for me to know whatever he was about to say would not make the evening easier. It would only make it clearer, and clarity, I was beginning to realize, was going to hurt more. "Because she's trying to prove that you are." The rain came down harder now. Not sudden, just heavier, like the night had stopped pretending to be gentle. I stood there under the awning, looking at him, feeling something shift inside me. Not panic, not yet. Just a slow, tightening awareness that whatever I thought this situation was, it wasn't that simple. "You said you're a lawyer," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Family law." The little boy beside him tugged his sleeve. "Dad, are we going inside?" "In a minute," he said gently, then looked back at me. "I'm sorry," he added. "I don't mean to overstep, but what happened in there, that wasn't random." I felt my jaw tighten. "Then what was it?" He paused, choosing his words more carefully now. "May I ask you something first?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Has your daughter been talking about you moving into assisted living?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." "Selling your house?" "Yes." "Has she asked you to sign anything recently?" That one stayed with me for a second longer, because it hadn't been one moment. It had been several. Envelopes on the table, casual explanations, light voices. "It's just paperwork. Nothing urgent. Just in case." "Yes," I said. "What kind of documents?" "Financial," I answered. She said it was planning, in case something happened to me. He exhaled slowly. Not surprised. Not confused. Just confirmed. "I see." The rain tapped steadily against the pavement now. Louder, more insistent. "What are you getting at?" I asked. He met my eyes. "There's a pattern," he said. "I've seen it before." A pause. Sometimes people try to build a record that a parent is no longer mentally capable. My chest tightened. "A record?" "They raise concerns," he continued, "to doctors, to neighbors, to business, anywhere it can be noted." My heart skipped. "The call to the restaurant," he added quietly. "That could become part of that." Something cold moved through me. "You're saying she's trying to prove I'm incompetent." "I'm saying it's possible," he replied, "and the pattern you're describing fits." The word possible didn't soften it. If anything, it made it worse. Because it meant I had to consider it, not dismiss it. "Why?" I asked. "Control," he said simply. "Of what?" "Your finances, your property, your decisions. Everything. Everything Martin and I had built. Everything I had protected after he was gone." I looked back through the window. Inside, people were still eating, talking, living. And I thought about Laura. Her voice, her insistence, her calm certainty that she knew what was best for me. Not care. Not anymore. Structure. Positioning. "I told her about tonight," I said. He nodded. "That matters." "Why?" "Because if you're out living independently, it contradicts the image she may be building." I turned back to him. "What image?" He didn't hesitate. "Someone who can't take care of herself." The words landed clean. And suddenly, everything Laura had said over the past year rearranged itself. Not random. Not protective. Intentional. Each suggestion. Each concern. Each document. Each push. All pointing in one direction. Not toward my safety. Toward control. I let out a slow breath. The confusion was gone now. Replaced by something clearer. Colder. "What should I do?" I asked. He thought briefly. "First, don't sign anything." "That won't be difficult." "Second, speak to your own attorney." I nodded. "And third," he glanced toward the restaurant door. Don't let tonight end like this." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He gave a small exhale, then raised his hand. "Excuse me," he called. The manager, who had been watching from inside, hesitated, then stepped out into the rain. "I'm very sorry about earlier," he began quickly. The lawyer didn't respond to that. Instead, "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." "Did Ms. Bennett behave in any way that suggested she was mentally unstable?" The manager blinked. "No." "Did she appear intoxicated?" "No." "Did she cause a disturbance?" "Not at all." The lawyer nodded once. "Then refusing service based solely on a third-party phone call could create problems for your business." The shift was immediate. Not dramatic, but clear. The manager straightened. "Oh." He looked at me, then back at the lawyer. "I didn't consider it that way." "I'm sure you were trying to be cautious," the lawyer said. "Yes, of course." A beat. Then, "Ms. Bennett," the manager said, turning to me fully now, "your table is ready, if you would still like to dine with us." For a moment I didn't answer, not because I didn't know what I wanted, because I felt the weight of the decision. Not about dinner, about something else, about whether I would walk back into a place that had just tried to turn me away, or whether I would let that moment define the night. I looked at the door, at the light spilling onto the wet pavement, then back at the lawyer. He didn't speak, just waited. And for the first time that evening, I didn't feel alone. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I would." The manager stepped aside and held the door open. "Please." I walked past him without hesitation. This time, the warmth of Bellini's didn't feel like memory. It felt reclaimed. Behind me, the door closed. The rain softened into a distant sound again, like it had been pushed back where it belonged. "Right this way," the manager said. I followed him through the dining room, and I felt it. The shift. People had noticed. They tried not to stare. Most of them succeeded. Some didn't. A woman near the window gave me a small, understanding smile. A man looked down at his glass when I passed. No one spoke. No one made a scene. But there was awareness. Witness. That was enough. The manager stopped at a table near the window. I recognized it immediately. "Here you are," he said. It was ours. The same table Martin and I had sat at every year. Same angle of light. Same quiet corner. Same view of the street outside. For a moment, I didn't move. The chair across from me was empty. Of course it was. But it didn't feel like absence. Not this time. It felt like space. Space I was choosing to sit in. "Thank you," I said. The manager nodded and stepped away. I stood there another second, then slowly took my seat. The chair felt familiar. Not physically, emotionally, like something my body remembered before my mind caught up. A waiter approached. "Good evening. Can I bring you something to drink?" "Yes," I said. "A glass of red wine." He nodded and left. No hesitation. No question. Just service. That alone settled something inside me. I rested my hand lightly on the tablecloth, closed my eyes for a moment, just long enough to let everything settle. When I opened them again, I looked across the table and let myself imagine him there. Not painfully, not desperately, just present. As if memory could sit quietly beside me without asking for anything. "You always said this place made everything taste better," I murmured. The wine arrived. I took a sip. Warm. Familiar. Grounding. For the first time that night, my hands were completely steady. Dinner moved slowly. Not because I was waiting. Because I wasn't. I ordered what I used to order. Not out of habit. Out of choice. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window. A woman sitting alone. But not lost. Not confused. Not fragile. Steady. That was the word that came to me. Steady. Halfway through the meal, I glanced toward the entrance. The lawyer was seated with his son. The boy was eating quietly, swinging his feet under the chair, unaware of anything that had happened earlier. The lawyer looked up. Our eyes met. He gave a small nod. Nothing dramatic. Just acknowledgement. I returned it. That was enough. When I finished eating, the waiter returned. "Would you like dessert?" I hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Yes, something small." He nodded. A few minutes later, he came back with a small plate. A slice of cake. Simple. A single candle placed carefully in the center. "Happy birthday," he said softly. Something in my chest tightened. But it didn't hurt. Not like before. I looked at the candle. The small, steady flame. For a moment, the room narrowed. 70 years. A lifetime. A marriage. A loss. A daughter I no longer fully recognized. And a night that had almost been taken from me. I leaned forward, closed my eyes, and made a wish. Not for things to go back. Not for things to be easier. Just for clarity. Then I blew out the candle. The flame disappeared instantly. But something else remained. Something quieter. Stronger. When I opened my eyes again, I didn't feel like someone who had been pushed out of her own life. I felt like someone who had stepped back into it. 2 months later, I sat in a lawyer's office across from a man who read everything twice before he spoke. "My conclusion is simple," he said. "You did the right thing by not signing." I looked at the documents. The same ones Laura had placed in front of me. Just in case. Nothing urgent. Standard planning. They didn't look dangerous. That was the point. "Explain it clearly," I said. He nodded. "These would have given your daughter increasing control over your finances. Gradually, at first. Then completely." "And the calls?" I asked. "That's the concerning part," he said. "It suggests an attempt to establish a pattern." "A pattern of what?" "Instability." The word sat between us. Heavy. Clear. "So she was building a case," I said. "Yes." No hesitation. No softening. Just truth. I sat in my car for a long time after that meeting. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. Because something inside me had shifted completely. I had spent months trying to understand Laura. Trying to be patient. Trying to believe concern was still love. Now, I wasn't trying to understand anymore. I was seeing. And seeing required something different. That evening, I called her. "Come by," I said. She arrived 20 minutes later. Exactly on time. She always was. "What's going on?" she asked. "I spoke to a lawyer," I said. Something flickered in her eyes. Gone just as quickly. "Oh, about what?" "You can answer that." A beat. Then a laugh. Too sharp. "I don't know what you mean." I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. The documents, the calls, the pressure. Her expression tightened. "That was for your protection." "Was it?" "Yes." "Or was it for control?" Silence. "I think you're misunderstanding." "No," I said. "I finally understand." That changed something. She looked at me differently now. Not as someone she could guide. As someone she couldn't move. "I was trying to make things easier," she said. "For who?" A pause. "For both of us." I nodded. "By taking my choices away?" "That's not fair." "No," I said quietly. "What you did wasn't fair." The room felt settled, like something had already broken. "I'm your daughter," she said. "Yes, I'm supposed to look out for you." "You are, not replace me." Her eyes filled slightly. "I didn't think you could handle everything." "I have been." A pause. "I will continue to." That was it. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. "You won't be signing anything," I said. She didn't respond. "And you won't be making calls about me again." Silence. "My life is not yours to manage." She picked up her bag slowly. "I thought I was helping," she said. I didn't answer, because at that point, it didn't matter what she thought. It mattered what she did. She left. The door closed, and the silence that followed felt different. Not empty. Clear. Life settled after that. Not all at once, but steadily. Laura and I became distant. Not hostile. Just no longer close. I kept my house. My decisions. My life. Some evenings were still heavy. Grief doesn't disappear, but it changed. It softened. It stopped pressing. And I went back to Bellini's. Once a month. Same table. Same time. The manager recognized me. No hesitation this time. "Welcome back, Ms. Bennett." I nodded. "Thank you." I sat by the window again. Ordered dinner. A glass of red wine. Not out of habit. Out of choice. At one point, I looked at the chair across from me. Still empty. But it didn't feel like loss. It felt like memory. Something I could live beside. Not something I had to run from. When I finished, I stayed a little longer. Because I wasn't in a hurry anymore. Outside, the streetlights reflected softly on the pavement. I thought about that night. The rain. The moment everything shifted. And the words that stayed with me. "You're not alone. You just needed someone to stand beside you." I paid the bill, put on my coat, and stepped outside. The air was cool, dry, quiet. I paused for a second, just to take it in. My life. Still mine. Not reduced. Not managed. Not signed away. Mine. I started walking. Steady. And this time, I didn't feel alone.